Hello everyone and welcome to this panel. Now I am joined by Ekaterina Malieskaia. Let's start with you. She's a physician, scientist and entrepreneur and co-founded Compass Pathways, a UK-based Nasdaq-listed company in the area of mental health. Then on my side, we see Silvio Kutic. He's a CEO and co-founder of Infobip, which is Croatia's first unicorn. Infobip is a leading global omni-channel platform with 70+ offices around the world. And last but not least, we heard it, we're joined by the Vice President of the European Investment Bank, Ricardo Mourinho. So let's start with the good. Why did you set up in Europe? I mean, you were based in Europe, but what did you appreciate setting up a startup in Europe, Ekaterina?
Well, our company works in the area of mental health and neuroscience. So UK was just a natural base, other than we lived there. There is a incredible capacity and thriving neuroscience field in the UK. It's Cambridge, Oxford, and other universities, so that was fantastic. UK government is also very pro innovation, and as long as you're a pre-revenue company doing R&D, you get tax credits, R&D tax credits, which was very helpful for a startup.
Thank you very much, Silvio. I mean, Croatia is not known as the hotspot for startups. Nevertheless, why is Europe an attractive place to set up a startup?
Yeah, so like Europe, okay, so like I am from Europe, I'm from this place a small place in Croatia called Vodnjan, from a rural part on the seaside on the coast of Croatia. And Europe is like a very good, I would say, quality of life, very good interpersonal communication between people, healthcare system, quality of life in general is like different than other parts. I had the opportunity to visit 50, 60 countries as we've been opening all these countries all around the world. I was for more than 5 years traveling more than 11 months yearly. So I could compare, let's say, the different cultures. Okay, of course we are from here, that's why we like the most here, but it has a lot of advantages in, I would say, general healthcare system, educational system, lots of like highly educated workforce. Universities are primarily free, and this is not the case in other regions globally, let's say. So there are like, these are, I would say, the positive things. But more of everything is like the connection between people. It's not so much individualistic. Okay, and Europe is like not uniform, depending on which part of Europe. Of course, Croatia is very different than Netherlands, UK, or Sweden in many things. But it's like a very positive environment, I would say.
Good. What about your perspective, Ricardo? Why Europe?
I think I can give you 3 reasons for doing a startup in Europe. The first, Maria already mentioned, is the great human capital that we have in Europe. The universities, the research centers, the good networks, the connections, and the ability of these people to work together. We have in clean tech 2 times more patents than US and 4 times more patents than China. This shows very well the strengths of Europe. The second is because you have great institutions like the European Investment Bank and the European Investment Fund that put every year 7 billion euros in the VC ecosystem to mobilize more than 10 billion of investment in equity. And the last one is because we have Web Summit in Lisbon, and I have this wonderful gathering every year. So I think these are very strong reasons to set up your venture capital, your startup in Europe.
Absolutely. So you said a lot of innovation, a lot of patents here in Europe. Nevertheless, there is a funding gap compared to the US and Asia, but we will talk about that later on. Silvio, you completely skipped VC funding in the life cycle of Infobip, which is pretty crazy. So how did you do that?
So I started, this company was founded in 2006, but I was started, so like our mission is to democratize the future of digital interactions between businesses and people. So we are like working on this technology, enabling companies how to better interact, communicate with their users, with their end users. And I started working on the first projects in 2001, end of 2001, when I was still a student. So this is my internship project after 21 years, you know. And my first
successful one.
Yes, and my first real job. And but you know, for the next 5 years, I was working on many projects, and Infobip as a project started the end of 2003. But this first virtual community for the small town from where I'm coming, okay, we launched that, but this project failed. My network, another project after that failed. The first Infobip project failed, then we found another Infobip project, it failed, then we found the third Infobip project. And we became from this very complex system of communication, just an SMS API platform connecting the mobile operators all around the world. And this started to scale exponentially. And we never needed any external capital. So we've been scaling from first day very, very quickly. And we've been reinvesting everything what we've been operationally earning from the company. And I mean, it was very, very, very high growth. And we've been bootstrapping the company till 2020. In 2020, we've been 1,500 employees already, 60, 70 offices all around the world, and almost $1 billion in revenue. But we've been, let's say, present in all continents, in the top 3 companies in our business. But we needed to expand to the US. And then we raised the capital to do an acquisition in US, and that's how we expanded there.
We'll talk about that expansion to the US. Ekaterina, you've stepped down from your executive role, but will continue as a board member of Compass Pathways. How challenging was that to do that from your own company?
It wasn't challenging. It wasn't a hard decision. I think phenotypically I'm a startup person. I'm an entrepreneur, and I think the company grew so quickly. We are a public company now, so there are a lot of requirements, a lot of constraints, and so I really enjoyed the kind of agility of a startup. And also, I think for me as a co-founder, it was an interesting test to see if the company can go on its own. As a co-founder, I need to step back and let the company become, we attracted immensely talented people. Now they need to step up and make it their own and take it forward. And so it was great to see for me that the company can, become and progress to the new stage.
Great. So let's move a little bit to the ugly side. Talking about challenges that startups face here in Europe compared to the US. You also mentioned that you expanded to the US. So what challenges do European startups have when they want to expand? Is it trickier for them to get VC funding or private equity in the US as a European startup?
Yes, so we've been bootstrapping the company, so we just skipped this VC stage.
Yeah, but private equity or else.
Private equity, yeah. So,
or just talk about the challenges, compared US. And
yes, I can say in 2020 we hired Citi, this is an investment bank here from London, and so we've been already very sizable, one of the most successful companies in our industry, growing 40% year over year at 1 billion. It's very quick growth. So, and we had 32 investors in our round A that we ran at that time, and I think maybe 30 of those investors were American investors, and it was for many of them, they never invested in our region, so it was a little exotic for them.
So the Balkans?
The Balkans, yes, and larger region. So these are the top, let's say, US funds that some of them, they have a presence through London, or some small team in London, or some are American funds. So we've been raising 300 million euros in our first round, and this was the only round that we raised. And, let's say, you receive also geographic discount on that, on the valuation. It's a little bit more, let's say, difficult. And I would say intellectual property, it's like they're looking how to, let's say, secure IP, which is like very different and on a lower level, you know, like than in US. So these are like, let's say, some of the main questions. And at that level, you know, it's like much easier, much more secure for them if we would move our like management to the US, and this was like for some of them a condition if we would like them to invest in us. However, you know, like after this 32, we had like few rounds, and in the last round we had the 4 very interested, and we managed to like find the right investor for us. But it would be much easier if we would be, let's say, based in the US than in Europe. Here, especially in our region there.
Okay, so a lot trickier. How would you see that, or how did you experience that, Ekaterina?
Well, we've never raised, at early stages, we've never raised money really from European VCs. For no particular reason. I think maybe American VCs were much more proactive, reaching out to us, very interested, very comfortable with risk and ambiguity. It was a, you know, strange new area. We work in psychedelics, so that was not necessarily well accepted back then. And then when we went public, we were the first company working with psychedelic that we went straight to NASDAQ. And part of it was access to capital, and part of it was that we wanted to demonstrate an exceptional rigor and transparency because we're working with, you know, compounds that are currently considered scheduled. So, you know, I don't have huge amount of experience of working with European VCs, so I can't really comment on that.
Which is a shame, Ricardo, if we hear that. We heard so many innovations are coming out of Europe. So what is the European Investment Bank doing in, you know, helping these startups?
Well, the European Investment Bank group, funds and the bank are putting in place mechanisms to finance later stage venture capital funds. We put in place the European Tech Champion Initiative, so it's 3,700 million euros, sorry, to finance the VC late stage market. We expect to mobilize over the next year 10 billion euros for venture capital on late stage, such that the companies can have our support through whole development cycle from the seed capital to later stage, and to decide or have the opportunity to decide to stay in Europe if they want to develop their business in Europe. I think this role is quite important. The amount of funds and the financing for equity is really important, but we need to improve the environment. We need to create a better environment for the IPOs. We need to create more liquidity in the market, and it cannot be only the public sector. You need to have a regulation that brings in life insurance and pension funds to invest small bits of their portfolios in the venture capital market, such that you get the deepness of the market and liquidity that you have in US. You cannot want to be US if you don't put in place the conditions to have the same advantage, the same incentives that you have in the United States. And then you need to have quite good and slim regulation. We don't need very large regulation. We need very good regulation. We need to be easier to create a firm, easier to finance, and easier even when things go wrong. And in venture capital, sometimes things go wrong. We need insolvency frameworks that are clear and that allow, as you said, that either we succeed or we learn. Because failing is learning what not to do for the next time. And in Europe, we need to have this passion for learning out of the experiences, and that's something that we need to instill in our younger generations and to boost the risk-taking. So I would say that this is a compound that we need to put in place. From the EIB side, we are the biggest supplier of venture debt that allows later stage firms to get funding without diluting the founders, keeping the incentives, and supporting firms to grow to the next stage and to scale up their production, scale up their dimension, and become more efficient. Without scaling up, will never get to the efficient that you see in US or in China or in other parts. And this is key for the European venture capital market and for startups and the innovation ecosystem to prosper.
Absolutely. So you know what needs to be done. You have a few initiatives, so focusing on scale-ups, which is very important. Are you working with the member states on actually, you mentioned what needs to be done to actually put it into place?
That's exactly what you're doing with this European Tech Champion initiative. This is a project by the bank, the Commission, and 5 member states, and others will join soon to get together and pool a fund of almost 4 billion euros to invest in large-scale venture capital funds that may finance companies that are looking for rounds over and above 50 million. But we'll never do this alone. We'll do this by mobilizing the private sector, crowding in the private sector, such that out of this 4 billion euros, you can mobilize figures that go up to 10, 15 billion euros, bringing in private sector investors, providing a seal of excellence to these fund managers that will exceed these funds, and creating a new wave of later stage venture capital in Europe that will allow us to have a level playing field, and so that these companies can decide if they stay in Europe or if they go somewhere. American companies can decide to come to Europe. We need to have an allocation of resources and an allocation of the companies depending on the structural features of the blocks of the countries, and not just because they are seeking finance wherever it's easier.
So we spoke about the good, we spoke about the bad, the challenges. Let's very quickly address the ugly. Why is Europe lagging behind the US when it comes to VC and startup fundraising? Maybe in one sentence.
We are behind because we don't have the same risk appetite, we don't have the same incentives, and we don't have the same type of players in the market. And again, I'll mention life insurance and pension funds, institutional investors that are similar to EIB because they have patience, they are investing for long, and they have amount of funds that allow to do risk sharing and to manage portfolios such that you appropriately manage risk.
Thank you very much. Now, just to close the round, what advice would you give to these, or if there are any early stage startup founders in here, what advice would you give them? Silvio.
Let's say just quickly, if we compare US and Europe, and why US is like they have 4 or 5 times more unicorns than Europe. So it's like mindset, the main, and you need to be like, I failed in almost everything that I did. You need to be open on failure, learning quickly, and maybe Europeans need to be more open on failures and celebrate certain learnings from that.
Thank you very much. Ekaterina?
I would say take care of your mental health.
That was a good
Also
pitch. Otherwise, come to you. Ricardo?
Well, unleash your creativity, dare to succeed or to fail, and count on us to support you in the good, in the bad, and in the ugly times.
Thank you very much. Muito obrigada, Ricardo Mourinho, Ekaterina Malieskaia, and Silvio Kutic. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you very much.
Thank you.